Summit started yesterday and will end on the 30th of November 2023. Khorata Moranyani, BTV News, Gaborone.
Botswana Police Deputy Public Relations Officer Senior Superintendent Nia Bagali says they have arrested 13 men and 2 women aged between 26 and 43 on 2 counts of arson and 3 counts of malicious damage to property. Senior Superintendent Bagali said the suspects appeared before Mulepolela Magistrate Court recently. Jessica Pilani with the details.
The suspects were arrested following the disturbance and riots that occurred in Mulepolola last week after taxi driver Penyo Jacoba was found dismembered and murdered near Musingi Lands. The suspects burned 2 randafels at Khodira Ward and burnt another house at Khosing Ward. They proceeded to the main court and set ablaze the Khotla shelter, causing damage to a government vehicle, and also smashed 52 office windows at the Kwenin Tribal Administration.
Let's reach 15. Ba ile gore ke BOTSWANA ile gore re ba isetsa gone gore ba go arabela melato ya go senya le go thuba property ya gone go le khotla le tsa tshwetso gore ba nelwe mo go conditional bail le ka mabaka a rile gore mongwe le mongwe wa bono tsontse ra itame ka 5000 pula aba bata mongwe yo le gore tare ha ile gore go na le bothata kana jang mo go insurance le ena ba itama ka 5000 pula ba tshwanetse gore tsatsi le letsatsi go simola tsatsi jeno for 2 weeks di beke tse pedi e be le gore ba ithipota go Mulepole police station tsatsi le letsatsi morago ga gone mo e tabele gore kgwedi ba ithipota gangwe hela mo kgwedi.
Senior Superintendent Bagali highlighted that the suspects might be sentenced to a jail term of no less than 7 years if found guilty.
Di kantse tsa go senya le go tshuba ha o kwa tsena ha mo kota se ga 7 years go yo go dimunyana gompieno se se diragalang ke gore le on social media we are monitoring, because when you incite violence through social media is an offense on its own. So our detectives are busy looking at the statutes tamola gore tota ga batho ba incite violence bakatui. So we are going for them.
More arrests are anticipated to be made. The public is implored to desist from taking material access on social media to heart and should always wait for clarity from the police before deciding to take matters into their own hands. Jessica Pilani, BTV News, Mulepolole.
The Ministry of Communications, Knowledge and Technology is in talks with Orange Botswana to decrease roaming charges, especially for countries such as Namibia. This was highlighted by Honorable Thulagano Sekgokgo when officiating the Orange Botswana 25th year celebration held recently. Refilwe Mutube.
As the momentum towards a high income and knowledge-based economy makes gains, Minister Sekgokgo acknowledged Orange Botswana for advancing connectivity and technology within the country's borders. With this advancement, the ministry was able to advocate for reduction of roaming charges, currently in negotiations with Namibia.
And Orange plays a very critical part of this. The skills, the training that you provide, the mentorship, your digital innovation centers, your work, particularly with women and the youth, is very commendable. What you even do at a primary level is sowing the very seeds that we need as a country.
A couple of weeks ago, I was in Tlokwen for a digital school, so it was number 75, I believe, where we gifted 50 tablets, 2 servers, and 2 projectors. And because we do things well at Orange, we also have trained the teachers, and we have made sure to digitalize all the curriculum.
The nation is assured easy access to data through digital revolution and an increase in the number of Orange data centers throughout Botswana.
We're committed well into the future to continue to support local development, local narratives, and invest in Botswana and her people. We aim to leverage the business's strength and resources to offer customers an unmatched experience because we see Orange as a true partner for Botswana.
Through Through its significant efforts of leading innovation, Orange Botswana, with the support of the government, hopes to create meaningful solutions to Botswana through digital revolution as well as finding new ways of conducting business in the digital space. Refule Mutube, BTV News, Gaborone.
Tsodilo Community Development Trust, TCDT, hosted the 4th annual Tsodilo Heritage Walk recently as a way of espousing fitness as well as improving the livelihoods of Tsodilo residents. The Heritage Walk, themed Tsodilo Heritage Walk for Nature Conservation, is aimed at conserving natural and cultural heritage. TCDT manager Mr. Setwara Sadimo says this year's Heritage Walk has improved compared to the previous walks. Tiny Tsugudu.
As compared to other previous heritage walks, this year's walk attracted more participants to appreciate the beauty of Tsodilo Hills. Environmental coordinator at Sandfire Motawakopa Mine, Mr. Leshato Mushaka, said they sponsored this event as it is in line with the company's corporate social responsibility pillar of education, so they channeled the sponsorship towards construction of an information and communication technology laboratory at a primary school in Tsodilo to assist people in the remote area to have access to technology, which would help develop local tourism and tourism products offered.
Sandfire Motawakopa Mine, we strive to impact in the communities that we operate within. One of our community pillars speaks to education, and this event's funds are going to be used for development of a computer laboratory at Tsodilo Primary School, which is really in line with our community pillars, and we found it fit for that reason.
Community na le sense of ownership mo go yone ke yone e tsamaisetsa ke yone e marketala sengwe le sengwe ke yone ya no re lemoga gore kana product ga e gola e tsena go bathong maybe then re lemoga gore mo nako e eta re tsenyetse dingwe like bo horse riding, the activities di ne dintsi gore batho ska ba henya like bo go go introduce the drone batho ba kgone go lebella lentswe ba dirisa drone.
Some finished the 15 and 31 kilometers walk to tell their experience.
Tsodilo Heritage Walk, me ke khonne go etsa 25 kilometers. Me like ke khonne go moetsa.
Go tsotse re ta go morago. Re le ka gore re bone gore mme bana ba rona ba heletse khotsa ja. Ga gona le dikgwedo tse di rileng. Re bitsa koloi a be re namola gore ya ne tere thuse gore ba te ba khona go batsa go ba isitsa go ba netanye. Se re tshaba re tshaba gore nya me aka ra etela pele bana ba rona be ba sala go morago gore sepe se dira la go morago ga bone me aka ke ba se bona.
This year the walk was sponsored by different organizations including Sandfire Motawakopa Mine, Ministry of Youth, Gender, Sport and Culture, and Kwamakau Mine, amongst others. Attendants were treated to a football and netball fiesta after the Heritage Walk. Tiny Tsugudu, BTV News, Tsodilo.
Bere residents in Khanzi North have welcomed the water supply project meant to address and end water shortage woes in their village. The project, which was handed over this week, comprises of a borehole which pumps 82 cubic liters per day, exceeding the 73 cubic liters quota needed in the village. The project, which was built at a tune of 24 million pula, had created employment for 34 locals. Angela Enosa.
Bere village is found in the Khanzi North constituency with just under 900 residents. For years, they have been challenged with water shortages, which are being addressed through the water supply project being handed over today.
Ritilo ga amogela metsi a rona botsadi a ntse ke bua ka one gore na tsenywa ka ponyo ya li ke ona ritilo go amogela letsatsi le metsi a teng ye o re skara ra re metsi ga yone
ke boitumelo hela metsi a phatlaletse batho ba itumela ha gona o pewa ka aka khana se bebila gona o ka botsanse o gela se water priest dirile mo kgaolo ya me ya bere metsi a te ga to ke borohoru eno e ka ha e metsi a te mo go yone a mantsi
dia gello ka ka lekotswana ka stena ka re mapako dikgomo di a tshwenya le batho ra utswa ra tsa ra gora ra itiriseletsa hante le pompo e tswalla ruri and re simla re gella metsi kgakala.
This borehole pumps over 80 cubic liters per day, the water being carried via 90mm pipes to the village 4 kilometers away.
Motsontso a tologa re ntse ra gola batsadi mme gore a re mo dingwageng tse di tang re tshwanetse re be re bona gore re lebela go pele ka go dialo re be re le tsenyetsa tanka e kgolwanyana re leka ka bojotlhe gore re tsise metsi go batho gore Motswana mongwe le mongwe a kgona go nwa metsi.
Gore tiro ye ke nngwe ya ditiro tse e leng gore ke maitlamo a puso le makgotla a mahatshehatse go bona gore setshedi se se tshwanang motho se bona metsi se bona botsogo jo bo siameng se bona thuto.
As not all the residents have connected water in their homesteads, provision will be made to install prepaid standpipes around the village.
Di prepaid le tsone se tserele mo nakong ya gore gompieno di rekwa motse mongwe le mongwe re tla le ka gore re tere di tsenye mme se gore di tsenye ha le gore lona le moalo wa dipipe ga gare ga motse ga di tsenye ga gare ga tsone re batla gore di atolotse re di tsenye gore itseng gore tota dikgotana tse di senang metsi re di atumetse ga tlase ga bone ba kgone gore ba tsenye ba dirise metsi ao go na le gore ba kapalatse ba tsena ga gare ga motse ba ba gare ga motse le kang gore ka bojotlhe lo itsengetse metsi botsadi go tsenya metsi ala ke 1500.
The residents are implored to take proper care of this long-awaited development.
Ara tlhokomeleng bone bonyenyane jo e leng gore puso ya be e regile bone di solar panel ke dilo tse e leng gore di diriswa thata mo merakeng hela jalo jalo mme a re itseng gore ke tsone tse di re sialang metsi ke rona re ka di baballang ka gonne ha re di tsaya re morahi o ha o ke rona re tabe ro bolaisa lenyora.
This project, built to the tune of 24 million pula, employed 34 locals. Angela Enosa, BTV News, Bere.
Kanye Council Chairman Mr. Mpodi Tole has acknowledged the progress made on some village development projects. He, however, said despite such efforts, the council still experiences shortage of funds since it doesn't have enough investment projects that generate revenue for the council to utilize when the need arises. Kisofetse Makwinja.
Ditole says he's concerned about some projects that have already been allocated funds, yet they are slow to commence, pointing out that such projects drag down the developmental progress of the community. The chairman also highlighted the possibility of some projects failing to start as expected for the year 2023-2024 due to a low budget.
The approved budget for the fiscal year 2023-24 stands at 156,867,320. For the first 7 months, the council has collected 3,518,709.6 over 100, primarily from interest on investments. While our overall spending aligns with expectation, certain votes such as repair of vehicles, fuel and lubricants, and security services have exceeded the average target expenditure. It is crucial for us to exercise prudent financial management and keep on coming up with new collection strategies.
Some councillors acknowledge some of the efforts made by the council, even though there are some projects they feel could have been included as they are of vital importance to the community.
Re tlhokana le dikoloi councilor rona sa mpe jala tlase ka ntateng ya gore ga yana dikoloi mananeo a le mantsi ka a le mantsi ha re kgone go a hitlhella ka ntateng ya gore councilor rona ga yana dikoloi bodiredi wa rona bo a sokola ka dilori.
Di internal road tsa rona ra sala re tsholetse gore di dire pele ga mariga mele jana santsentse re se re di dire tsela tsa rona tsa di sule bona ntse di rala mo tsa rona di tsela tsa rona di na le sekgwa ke dio tse sala re tsholetse go tsa ke di dirile ba di hitse gompe di trenches tsa rona tsa le di rasolela gore di slitiwe mele jana
The residents of Kanye have been given a heads up on the ongoing wildfires that have been affecting the region, which is said to have now reached a total of 41 since the month of June this year.
and have so far ravaged over 700 hectares of land. Gese Khofetse Makwinja, BTV News, Kanye.
Comedy has the potential to grow and flourish to new heights in Botswana. This was said by the events manager for Maung International Arts Festival, Mr. Thato Mulusi, at a comedy night in Maung, emphasizing that they organized the comedy night to develop local talent. Anthony Tobogang.
This is one of the acts from the comedy night, a series of events of the Maung International Arts Festival held annually to showcase different talent. This year's event included both local and international acts from countries like Lesotho and South Africa in efforts to diversify the standard of comedy in Botswana.
And it was quite a lovely event that went down today. And, this is just part of celebrating the creative industry, something that we've been doing for the past 10 years now. COVID slowed us down a little bit, but we didn't allow that to, take away the beauty of what we have been doing. And so tonight was, a really amazing night.
And the comedy night it's one of the events which are liked so much by the community, because comedy it makes people smile, it makes people laugh, it makes you momentarily forget your problems, you get shallowed by whatever is happening on stage and you relax. So it's one of those art forms saying or people should come and for once in a while laugh and be jolly.
Comedy fanatics in attendance appreciated the developments and growth of this event, adding that more events of this caliber are a necessity.
I just wish that from here we can just conquer the world with comedy. Comedy is such a beautiful thing. Comedy, it makes us relax, it makes us forget all our troubles and whatnot. So whatever I was expecting today, it was met. All the comedians tonight, they were fabulous, they were beautiful, they were funny, most important.
The local comedians, I got a local like Maung specifically, they've been growing so much. Some of them, like we've been performing together, you can see that the creative writing is growing. People are putting effort into the craft and it can grow. I mean, give it a few years, they're going to be performing internationally as well. I mean, some have already started doing Zimbabwe. I think Trix, who was on the lineup as well, on Zimbabwe. Johnny Pula was in Zambia as well. Valoid was in Namibia just the other day. I was in South Africa just a few weeks ago. So it's a lot that is happening, and it's quite encouraging to see what Botswana develop in that regard.
The aim is to lure tourists and investors so as to help grow this event. Anthony Tobogang, BTV News, Maung.
BOTSWANA Trust Playgroup is a preschool that prepares children for reception classes through teaching skills such as writing, coloring, and painting. The playgroup held its graduation ceremony recently, where parents were urged to play an active role in their children's education. Tiny Tukudu reports.
BOTSWANA Trust Playgroup is a preschool run by the Shakawe Village Development Committee where they provide free education. Children are admitted free of charge to start their reception classes, readying them for Standard 1. On top of providing fundamental skills necessary for primary school, the learners are also taught how to conserve the environment from grassroots level. On this day, 35 graduated.
SAVE partner le di VDC tse di harologanyeng mo Botswana partner le di VDC di ka tshwara 45 ka kwano re bereka le di VDC di ka tshwara 16 tse ile go na le tsone dikolo tsa bananyana. We support ka go rutuntsha matishara, most of them they were trained by SAVE.
Ara tenka kwano ruto go amogana dikitso tse di tshwere tsa gore bana ba re ka ba godisa ka tsela e ntse jang. Ara tenka kwano re to go bona gore bana ba rona ba dira jang go sekolong. Se ka ja mutela go tele ganla ha ke itia go se tso boa. Sella mo te o bona gore ngwana o dira eng.
Parents were urged to join forces with teachers and play an active role in their children's education.
Tahela
ka re tisa bana ba rona re be re ema ha kgorohale ke saena be ke boela lapeng go boela ga mo go lapeng ga ke itse gore a ngwana ke mo sekolo o kgona go ithuta o a phuthulugile kana jang mo go rona go gore ga gore tshwenye ke saena hela be ke boa ngwana ka mosoko primary ha masimolo ga mmitsa mora re kana ngwana ga bue ga kwa le ga re o ka thoka ke re ntse le kwa kana kwa ke ditshupetela go isitswe ma form 3 mme go sa nna jalo
ke batla go bua le motsadi ke supe jaana gore ngwana gore e nne ngwana yo thopegileng yo yang go nna ngwana wa motia yo re tla sulela gore o ntse ba gaetsho go laola hela gore o godisitswe jang.
Lessons learned here not only help the learners but their families as well.
Bomana ke ba tsile bona ba sa itse go bua sone Setswana. Sekole se ke breakthrough. Ba ithutetse Setswana ha mo ditsaleng. Ga ke bua yana ba tsena go ka siana. Ga ke palwe ke go ta go itumela go ka siana ka gore go ka siana ba ngwana ke ba dirase.
Save Wildlife Conservation has partnered with BOTSWANA Trust and VDCs to support early childhood development program in various communities. Taini Tsugudu, BTV News, Shakawe.
It is time now for sports with Ntaburang Sebetlela Ntebu.
Hi, I saw an interesting news piece about comedy, and I believe comedy is rapidly growing in the country. Looking at William, he won international awards, and you know, I don't know, what do you think of comedy?
William wins an international award, and suddenly comedy in the country is rapidly growing.
It is not his first time.
Okay, please proceed with sports, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Khomozo. This is BOTSWANA Tonight Sports News, and I am Ntaburang Sebetlela. The senior women's national football team, the MES, managed to register a point in Kenya after playing to a 1-1 draw against the Harambee Starlets today in the first leg final round of the WAFCON 2024 qualifiers match. Ditebe scored the MES opener before Majolini Nekesa leveled the matters through a penalty. The second return leg will be played next week, Tuesday, in Gaborone at the National Stadium, where the winner will book a slot at the WAFCON 2024 next year in Morocco.
I thought it was a very difficult match for us. We played very good opponents. They did well when they had the ball, and we had to adjust to the demands of the game. And with more minutes being played, we adapted when we settled well in the game. And I thought we did very well to manage the opponents, and we played in moments that we wanted to play in. And Kenya is a very good team. They put up a fight. They had the support. And for us, we had to settle in the game and see how we can get goals.
I actually... Gaborone United Marketing and Communications Manager Herbert Letsebe confirmed that they have parted ways with Namibia defender Kennedy Hamutenya and striker Ungabetse Makhantai due to indiscipline. Letsebe said those decisions were made in the best interest of the club. Katlego Khakwele with the details.
Letsebe highlighted that Gaborone United Independent Disciplinary Committee took those decisions as the club does not condone any indiscipline from players, technical team or staff members.
Each and every staff member of Gaborone United is aware of this code of conduct, the do's and the don'ts. It's a code of conduct. So unfortunately, it was contravened severely. And we had to take action at the end of the day. These are two of our quality players. These are two boys who contributed to the success of the club. But when it comes to discipline at GU, we don't tolerate indiscipline.
He further said the club constantly hold workshops facilitated by professionals to educate their employees about issues of code of conduct.
What we did as a club, something that we are doing actually every season. We normally take our players through this code of conduct. It's not just a question of them just signing it. We take them through, a full session, discussing the code of conduct so that we could we could familiarize themselves with it. And this is exactly what happened even at the beginning of the season.
Today, Gaborone United are at the summit of the Botswana Premier League log standings with 16 points after registering 5 wins, 1 draw and 1 loss from 7 games. On Saturday, Moyaholele traveled to Lobatsa Sports Complex to lock horns with Police 11 in Week 8 Botswana Premier League encounter. Katlaho Kakwele, BTV Sport, Gaborone.
And lastly, the Minister of Youth, Gender, Sports and Culture, Tumiso Rakgare, applauded Botswana Netball Association for being able to host the 2023 Africa Netball Cup despite the short notice they were given. Rakgare highlighted that when officially opening the 2023 Africa Netball Cup today, which started yesterday. The cup, which was initially to be hosted by Uganda, has attracted 6 countries from the 17 expected, competing for the top spot, and will run until the 6th of next month. The championships, which are held every 2 years, has attracted 6 women's teams, while the men's category has 4. This year marks the 13th edition of the African Netball Cup.
We are aware that as Botswana, we had to step in last minute to host this competition after African Netball decided to change host countries some 2 months ago. Being in this hall for an international netball event, no doubt, brings back a great sense of nostalgia. Who can ever forget the 2017 Netball World Youth Cup that had us coming here in our thousands every day of the competition to watch the world's best youth netballers. I would like to request that while you enjoy yourselves during the competition, please put your best foot forward. For we would like the fortunes of our continent in international competitions to change for the better within the next few years.
It's possible when we are united. I would like to take this opportunity to say, CEO of the BNSC, the chair and your board and your staff, this is all what we need. The support that you gave us made this dream to come true. All what we need is that support to pull together, because we are doing this for the benefit of the athletes. If we had not managed to put this together, Africa would have fallen apart in netball. This is the only chance for Africa to have these ranking games, because we are not the same. Others are managing, or their government are in support to take them overseas to play these international games to better their rankings.
African Netball bringing us to the end of our sports bulletin tonight. Thank you for staying with us. Now back to Komoto to give us the back heads.
Thank you so much, Ntebo. Until we meet again tomorrow, ma'am, have yourself a fantastic evening.
Thank you very much, my lady. Do have yourself a great night.
Thank you so much. That was Ntebo Simatlela giving us the latest in sports. Let's take a final look at stories leading the way this evening. Government is committed to ensuring that Botswana businesses are supported to play a key role in the country's economy. "15 suspects arrested over recent riots in Molapolole." And in sports, Gaborone United parts ways with defender Kennedy Mutenya and striker Unkabetse Makhantai. That's all that we had for you this evening in our news bulletin. BTV News, Ikanyarona, #BW Mindset Change, interpreting in sign language was Kilibongi Babiteng Okatusa.
Good evening and welcome. The weather forecast tonight is brought to you by Kumo Cecil Monarch. The following are the rainfall amounts recorded this morning at 8. We recorded 25 millimeters at Kole Primary School, 14 millimeters at Khamu Dubu Landfill, 8 millimeters at Chobe Junior Secondary School, 6 millimeters at Pitzem Primary School, 3 millimeters at Solokola Primary School, 2 millimeters at New Kanahas Primary School, and 1 millimeter at Dikhonye and Plateau Primary School. This evening, convective clouds are visible over the entire country. We are still expecting some isolated thunder showers over Ngamili and Chobe, Khansi Khalahadi, southern, southeast Gatleng, Central and northeast district. it will be cloudy in the morning, but as the day progresses, it will be partly cloudy over southern, southeast Gauteng and southern central and northeast district, with some isolated thunder showers expected over the entire country. In the morning, we're expecting to record minimums of 17 degrees Celsius over Francistown and Celebe Pique, 18 degrees Celsius at Good Hope, 19 degrees Celsius at Tsani, 20 degrees Celsius at Tsabong and Hansi, 21 degrees Celsius over Maung, Kasane and Letlhakane. In the afternoon, we're expecting warm temperatures over southern central and northeast district, with hot temperatures expected over Ngamile and Chobe, northern central, southern southeast Gauteng and Kweneng district. We're expecting to record maximums of 33 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius. Over Hansi and Kalahadi, we're expecting very hot afternoon temperatures. We're expecting to record maximums of 36 to 38 degrees Celsius. The fire bulletin is showing some active wildfires over Ngamile and Hansi, Kalahadi, Kweneng, and Central District. The fire danger index for tomorrow is showing dangerous to extremely dangerous conditions over some areas of our country. The public is advised to handle fire with care. Looking at some cities in Africa, we're expecting some showers over Luanda, Nairobi, and Dar es Salaam, with partly cloudy conditions expected over Windhoek. Few patches of clouds are expected to be visible at Cape Town. Clear skies are expected over Port Elizabeth, and some thunder showers are expected over Antananarivo. We're expecting some clear skies over Addis Ababa, Khartoum, and N'Djamena. Partly cloudy conditions are expected over Rabat, and some thunder showers are expected over Monrovia. That's the weather forecast. Have yourself a good evening.
Batsadi ba buile ka ditsela tse di mo mokgwatheng mo kgaolong ya lonae. Ditsela tse mo dingwageng tse di hitileng go simolola ka 2018-2019 kone tsa sala ko morago e le gore madi ona CCP a bonthabongwe ja one le nna le diralobo ka one bokete ja ditsela tse di mo magaeng ne re ketola ka one mme re eta re dira le tse dingwe ditiro tse e leng gore di ne di patika khuduthamaga ya puso ga mmogo le palamente ya lefatshe la Botswana tsa dira tshwetso ya gore ditsela tse jaanong e nne tsone tse e leng gore madi a constituency di tabong go itebagantswe le tsone e seng sepe gape.
No buiwa gore gona le thaelo ya metsi go ditsheng dingwe mo motseng wa rona kana mo kgaolong ya rona. Metsi a ra tlhokang mo kgaolong ya rona ke selekano sa 5 million liters a metsi ka letsatsi. Metsi a bontsi jwa metsi a teng a tswa ko madirelong a leng teng gompieno a Kasane treatment plant e leng gore gona gore e thatswe metsi e be khromeletse metsi ko pele a selekano sa 3.6 million liters ka letsatsi. Re heditse thabollo e ntšha ya Kasane water treatment plant e leng gore ka letsatsi e tla be thatswa metsi a kana ka 16 million liters ka letsatsi. Madi a thabollo yone ke 303 million pula mme ke yona tharabollo ya senelaruri ya dikgang tsa metsi.
Go buile ka tsela ya Kachika Parakarung tsela e ntse e dirwa ya re ntse go tsweletse ga bo gonna le ditsheko tse jaanong kana itlhela ga re le puso re itlamile gore ga rena go tsenelela kgotsa go herelela mo mererong ya bosekisi gore we are a government that respects the rule of law. Kanye go gile ka lobaka mme a go ntse jalo go gore go engwe pele ke bua jana ke re kanye we hedile tla re ka di 16 sa November e be ile gore re bona gore a re ka wa da kontraka go tsweledisa ha tsele e ne emeteng go ya go tsena go Parakarung. Mangwe a maphata ha ba ga mo dikgaolong gona le package ya matlo gore kanye e tshwere ka o mabedi gore re lwantshe letlhoko la matlo mo dikgaolong. So re ne re kopa gore one maphata le boeteledipele jwa metse le ba ba ikemetseng motse mongwe le mongwe go irwe mo go teng survey ya go bona gore matlo a ka nna kae a tlhokalang le gore a gona le ba ba ka agang rona re le puso e be re tla go a rentisa. Re na le tsamaiso ya gore re age matlo ka BHC. BHC ba gaetswe ke lephata la puso mme le e leng gore puso ga e lehe madi. Maphata a puso le ba ba ikemetseng ba setse ba tsile ko go rona ba supa gore ba tlhoka matlo a le kae mo e leng gore e tla re ntse re tsweletse re agale ha e le gore re ka bona madi go bo gore re a oketse.
Ya motlakase o tswang ka ko ntle o na le dikgwetlho ke tlhalose gore ba lephata la motlakase ba mo setse ba simolotse go dira moalo wa phatlalatso ya motlakase. Northwest Transmission Grid is at design stage mme tla re mo ngwageng o tlang bo ba simolola go a dira one maharatlhatlha ao a e leng gore a tla ba raya gore jaanong bo Pandamatenga le Bokasane yaanong ba gokelelwa mo motlakaseng wa mo gae.
Right now ke mo Letshola Thebe Hospital mo Mau. Ha ke leng teng ha gona le network ya Wi-Fi e leng gore ke dumela gore rotlhe Batswana re itse re teng. Ke ntse ke le gone mo Letshola Thebe ke tswa mo dithusong tsa me ke bo ke nna hantle ke dirisa Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi e mo Letshola Thebe e botlhokwa hela thata. E botlhokwa mo e leng gore o kgona go dira ditiro tsa gago tsotlhe mo especially gongwe o le motho wa business. O kgona go tsena mo Wi-Fi ke Wi-Fi ya mahala o dira sengwe le sengwe se o batlang go se dira mo go sone.
It's a very good initiative actually from the government to help us with it. We can easily access information and it also helps us to stay home and avoid doing bad things. And then normally these days you can learn a lot of things through Wi-Fi. I think they should simply improve it and so that you cannot walk from home to come to the hospitals. Maybe they can widen it and then we access it from home.
The internet has helped a lot of us in terms of researching, in terms of good application and send a good application.
Smart sports, it's a pleasure to me about. So smart sports if you are for example, you go from 5 yana, you can batla di past papers online and look if kinezo topic ke sa tlhaloganye ka yone ke a research and I get more information than or teacher about tutor.
Re dirisa maranyana smart bots for research nngwe re na le molwetse gona le case re sa tlhaloganye sentle re research ka yone ga gona le sengwe dikgang re bala dikgang mo di computereng re dirisa yone le ka di cell phone
ha sa ke go re ne lo di laptop ke kgona go understand like go tlhaloganya dio sentle tse go ka tsone go nga go tlhalisiwa hela e be ke lebeletse
ke tsisa ngwana go moeke ne ke tsile go dirisa Google gore ke research dio tse leng gore ga rena dibuka tsa teng ya no re research ka internet.
Smart bots ke se dirisa go research during mo di assignment tsa ka ko sekolo ga ke sa tlhaloganya teng ke tsena mo smart bots ke a Google be ke bona di answer.
Wi-Fi ra itse re te ra dirisa le di client le tsone da dirisa re kgona go bona di post mo di Facebook re kgona go chata ko le masika le ditsala ko WhatsApp le mo Facebook.
We are going to use it, especially that nowadays schools have a problem of shortage of textbooks. So teachers and students are going to research and check for the topics, teachers preparing for the students and students reading to understand what the teachers have taught them. Students' learning will be enhanced. Like after the teacher teaches, students will get into the internet and broaden their understanding by researching on the same topic that the teacher taught.
Shantukuna shagana kira kuchanisa smart boards. Chekuti tinokwanisa kuwana mabasa. Taura na manishamwari. Zvakanaka pasina kushandisa mari.
Na hake nante ke bapile le Pico Prema. Hake le mo jarteng e ke nna mo go yone ke tsaya la ka go. Ke tsa 24/7. A gona tsatsi la mahala. Ke bakanyetsa batho dikoloi. Ha koloi e tsietsa ke a gugula.
What's thulaganyo ya rona e tlile bokhutlo mo primaneng ena tsatsi la gompieno Benson ke ne ke itumetse ke tsa jalo gore le mmogedi go gae o itumetse go bona ona le rona mo tsatsing la gompieno.
Nyane ke na le malatsi a le mane hela ke le mo ofu. Re go masimo ke re ke tlholora me pula e tlana me re tla lema tololo a gona ka pula ba te polo a pile bona ba didimetse hela ga ba bue gore a e tlana ilana ling a ga ka kiana bora di tractor ba di khobola ba pakanya ba tshentse di ole kana ka tseleng nyenyana go rile tururu
ba te polo a pile sala ka ba tlhalositse gore go tla nna le pula e butsana monongwaga
a re boelle ko marakano metsi ka metsi ba kopane ko khotleng ba bitse bo re a itse ba ne ba nesa dipula bogologolo simple
ke dumela jalo gore re ithutile mo re kgonne go ithuta mo bosigong ja gompieno mme go itlhela re kopana gape mo nakong e tlang go tswa go rona le badiri ka rona a nne boroko.
The road to destiny is not paved with brick and tar, but with vision and determination that unveil over time who we truly are when we get there. The Ministry of Transport and Public Works has embarked on a journey of transformation to enhance the efficiency of transport system in the Greater Gaborone area. This journey of the Greater Gaborone Urban Transport Improvement Project is funded by the Government of Botswana, assisted by the World Bank and OPEC Fund for International Development. The ideas adopted through this transport improvement project will for the next 25 years transform Greater Gaborone to a mobile compact city based on concepts of urban transport development in relation to land settlement and use. Wasting no time and without a moment to spare, the government of Botswana, through the Ministry of Transport and Public Works, initiated the construction of 3 bridges or overhead crosses along the KT Motsete Drive, Western Bypass. At the junction with Lobatse Road, Game City Circle, Willie Sibone Road, BTV Circle, and Kudumatse Drive, Rainbow Circle. The installation and operation of new modernized traffic signaling systems and centralized traffic control (CTC), as well as the layout improvement of selected intersections in Greater Gaborone. These projects will go a long way in enhancing critical transport infrastructure required for improving quality of life for citizens and visitors and strengthening economic development in the Greater Gaborone area. The ministry is set on fulfilling Vision 2036 aspirations for the benefit of all Botswana through sustainable roads of a global standard that promote prosperity for all. Ministry of Transport and Public Works, gateway to world-class infrastructure and transport services.
are underway and have been all through the day over any possible extension to that ceasefire, allowing, of course, more time for humanitarian aid to reach ordinary Gazans and also the release of some hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Israel has said clearly on many occasions that it will resume the war until all of its aims are achieved. Now, those objectives are the return of all the hostages and the destruction of Hamas. So there will never be a repeat of October the 7th. Then, of course, there's the huge unanswered question of who will govern Gaza once the dust has literally settled. Well, I want to look at some of those issues now, and to do that, we're joined on the line from London by Oliver McTernan, who is director of an organisation called Forward Thinking. That's an organisation that works on conflict resolution. First of all, thank you so much, Mr. McTernan, for your time this evening. We do appreciate it. I want to start by asking you about these negotiations over a ceasefire extension. How do these kind of negotiations work?
Well, in a normal situation, you would have two groups in the same building with a mediator going from one to the other. So there's less chance of misinterpretation or anything getting lost in the translation, as we may say. I think in this particular case, the Qataris are doing a remarkable job because they're caught up in a very complex process where, as we understand, there are 5 or 6 parties involved. First of all, you have Hamas political wing, then you have the Hamas military wing. There's got to be communication there. You've got Israel, you've got America, and you've got Egypt also involved. So I think if they pull off an extension of the truce, it will be a remarkable achievement on their part.
You don't sound particularly optimistic. What have we learnt on this sort of thing from similar conflicts?
Well, I think this one has a peculiarity of its own, and that is being shaped by the fact that right from the beginning, I think Israel, under Mr. Netanyahu's leadership, has set it incompatible objectives. You can't say on the one hand, I'm going to eliminate Hamas, and on the other hand, say I'm going to negotiate with Hamas for the safe release of all the hostages. I think it's obvious that those two objectives are incompatible. Now, it's becoming clear to me that as time goes on, Hamas are finding it more and more difficult to actually locate the civilians that were taken, because as we understand, not just did Hamas fighters cross into Israel on the 7th of October, but so did a number of other groups, including some of the criminal gangs from northern Gaza. So in order to be able to locate, first of all, and then to make sure that the process of gathering them in a safe place is safe and they are protected from harm, I do think you do need longer than a day at a time ceasefire. My hope would be that there would be a pause to enable the collection of the hostages in safe places, and then resume the process on the 10-a-day. And hopefully that will lead to what we all desire, a permanent ceasefire.
So many people are just looking at the wider picture beyond these negotiations on whether or not to extend a ceasefire. So many people have invested so much effort in trying to resolve this conflict with not a great deal to show for it. Why is it so intractable?
Well, I think it's intractable because there's never really been a serious effort to resolve it in a durable way. Oslo, in my opinion, was a disaster because it was imposed from outside. It was a top-down solution. The indigenous Palestinian peoples that were there through all of the occupation weren't involved in that process. Now, I come from Ireland, and on the island of Ireland, we had to learn a very hard way that, first of all, these type of conflicts cannot be settled by military means. They require a political process, but more important, that political process has to be inclusive. All the parties with constituency, all the parties that are part of the problem have to be part of the solution. And that's never happened in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I do hope that this will be the end of the cycle of violence we've witnessed over years, especially since 2005, when Gaza was separated from the rest of the West Bank, the occupied territories. I do hope that this will be the end, and on two levels, on the level of Israel and the level of Palestine inclusively, and then the international level, there will be a real serious effort to once and for all to find a solution where both peoples can live with commitment to each other, commitment to peace and the prosperity of the region. I think that is achievable, but it requires a political commitment on all sides to achieve it.
That's in the longer term, in between extending or not a ceasefire and that working towards a durable peace. What sort of situation do you see for who is governing Gaza after this war ends and before there is a durable peace?
Well, I think more important than addressing that issue is for us to look at what is actually happening. I was in Berlin yesterday, and the German foreign minister made the comment that we're seeing the rule-based international order crumbling. It's disappearing because we're not adhering to it. So I think that's the first thing. We've got to, the Secretary General we just heard describe Gaza at present as an epic catastrophe. Well, I think first and foremost, we've got to say, let's put an end to the fighting. Let's have a permanent ceasefire. Secondly, who governs Gaza, that should be a decision of the Palestinian people alone, the Palestinian people in Gaza, in East Jerusalem, and in the West Bank.
But of course, Israel will need to have its security guaranteed. It can't run the risk of October the 7th happening again.
Yes, but its security will lie in having good relationships with its neighbor, the Palestinian people. That's where the security will be. We've discovered that security doesn't exist in high fences, in automatic guns and everything else. It's a false security. And the risk of that sort of security, it breeds further and even worse sort of forms of resistance and terrorism. So I think Israel, of course, has to be part of this discussion. Whatever is agreed has to be acceptable also to the Israeli people. But I think until we move away from the military mentality and think that we can solve these issues by the gun and by the bomb and the shell, and move into a realization that these are human problems, it's essentially a grievance problem, and grievance problems are solvable provided you have the right mechanism and the right process. And I repeat again, that must include all the parties, including the far right in Israel, the national religious groups. Their feelings and aspirations must also be accommodated. They're not incompatible. People have to learn to make the compromises that are necessary to be able to live in peace and harmony.
OK, well, we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. I want to thank you very much, Oliver McTernan, there, the director of Forward Thinking, which is a conflict resolution organisation. Thank you very much for his thoughts on that. Well, we heard earlier the UN Secretary General saying that Gaza was in the midst of an epic humanitarian catastrophe. The World Health Organization also warning that overcrowding in Gaza could lead to the spread of diseases. And with a report on that humanitarian situation, here's Matthew Mary Carachet.
The lines for drinking water stretched for hours. As the truce between Hamas and Israel enters its 6th day, civilians in Gaza City waited at a desalination plant that is only sometimes operational.
We rarely get fuel. This means we can't provide water for the people, and this leads to long queues of thousands of people. We're not able to operate the facility.
Between 180 and 200 trucks containing water, food, and medical supplies have crossed into Gaza daily since the truce began Friday. That's fewer than half as many trucks as before the fighting began. Aid agencies have warned that current levels of aid are not enough to provide significant relief after 7 weeks of war. Calling the conditions in Gaza catastrophic, the World Food Programme warned Tuesday that Gaza's population faced a high risk of famine should the truce end, and with it the access to aid.
In 4 days of humanitarian pause, WFP and partners have delivered desperately needed aid to hundreds of thousands in the hardest to reach areas. Our team saw hunger, desperation, and destruction. People who have not received any relief in weeks. Hundreds of thousands that are facing an immediate risk of starvation. WFP hopes for the extension of this pause, which offered a window of relief that could pave the way for longer-term calm.
The only way for aid to enter Gaza is through the Rafah crossing on its border with Egypt. The UN Relief Agency for Palestine on Tuesday called on Israel to extend the truce and to open Israeli crossings into Gaza for more humanitarian aid.
Well, Israel says it has carried out a raid on the Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank and killed 2 senior terrorists. In separate news, the Palestinian Authority that runs parts of the West Bank says 2 children were also killed by gunfire in Jenin. Well, emotions about the war between Israel and Hamas, of course, reverberate well beyond the region. There have been anti-Semitic attacks in the US and in Canada and also around Europe. And a lot of authorities have tried to come up with ideas to try to help alleviate the tensions. And one of those ideas being used in Brussels is a dialogue coach who is helping school students to talk through their feelings on the conflict. And we have this report now from Fernand van Tits in Holland. Belgium.
Salam in Hebrew is shalom. It means peace. You see, that's where it all starts.
Peace is at the heart of the message Mohammed has come to deliver this morning at this secondary school in Brussels. Here, 8 out of 10 students are Muslim. And so its management team has hired this dialogue coach to come and talk about the war between Israel and Hamas.
On the 7th of October, Hamas attacked Israel. Israel responded. That is not how a wise person should respond. And that goes for both sides.
By acting out small plays, Mohammed encourages students to empathize. Here, there's a group of Palestinians. The others are Israeli.
Ja, hallo. We hebben heel dorst, we hebben 3 dagen niet gedronken.
Ja, sorry, excuseer, ik heb schrik enzovoort. Ik en mijn dochter zijn nu alleen. Sorry, ik kan jullie echt niet helpen. Hier, alsjeblieft.
Wat denk je? Dat is heel lief.
Nee, geen probleem.
You shouldn't always believe social media because there's information that isn't true.
Some will pick the Palestinian side, others stand with Israel. I think that's not the right solution to do that.
In my opinion, after so many years, no one deserves this. Neither the Israelis or Palestinians asked for this war, and both are suffering.
The dialogue is eased by this 26-year-old Palestinian.
Mohammed, the fact that he is a Muslim, this makes it very strong. The cultural factor is very deep in us and determines a lot, in this instance, in a good way.
Since the Islamist attacks in Brussels, this school is trying to avoid the radicalization of its students.
We see students here who are still very young, and we are looking to work in a preventative way. We are trying to avoid anything that could bring us back to 2016, when the attacks in Belgium took place.
The importance of dialogue isn't just taught inside the classroom. In the school's entrance hall, both the Israeli and Palestinian flags are displayed side by side.
Well, in other news, Moscow says any decision by Helsinki to allow what it called a concentration of troops on its border with Russia would be viewed by Moscow as a threat. This after a senior Polish official posted on social media that Poland was ready to help Finland at its Russian border. And this as Finland is to close the last remaining crossing point on its border with Russia at midnight tonight, after accusing Russia of orchestrating an operation to direct migrants towards Finland. Russia denies such a manoeuvre. And Finland's border guard says it is unaware of any Polish offer. Well, more on all this now from Cami Knight.
This checkpoint currently serves as the only way for people to enter Finland from Russia. At midnight on Wednesday, it will close down, at least until mid-December. The Finnish government made the announcement amid concerns that Moscow is ushering migrants to the border in harsh winter conditions and loosening its own border checks, claims Russia denies.
Instrumentalized migration from Russia has continued. I would like to stress that it is not just the number of arrivals that is an issue, but the phenomenon itself. In recent days, there has been a growing understanding that this is an organized operation, not a genuine emergency.
Finland had already shut 7 of the 8 checkpoints this month following a sharp increase in arrivals. The only crossing that will now remain open is for freight only. Authorities say 1,000 people with no visas have arrived since August, 900 of those arriving just this month. Analysts say it's a strategy to create chaos on the EU's external borders, particularly following Finland's accession to NATO, a sentiment echoed by NATO's Secretary-General.
Well, I think this is another example of how Russia is using many different tools to put pressure on neighbors. We have seen them using energy. We have seen them using cyber attacks. So the fact that Russia is now using migration as a tool is yet another example.
2 years ago, the EU accused Russia's ally Belarus of using migrants seeking a better life in Europe as pawns to destabilize its democracies. Finland is no longer taking any chances. Earlier this year, the Finnish border guard even began the construction of a barrier fence along some key parts of the border.
And that from Cami Knight. Time now for business with Yuka Roya. And I gather protesters celebrating their victory against corporate power over a controversial copper mine.
In Panama, that's right. Well, for weeks, thousands of Panamanians have marched every day to demand the cancellation of a 20-year concession the government granted to Canadian mining giant First Quantum, arguing that its presence violates Panama's sovereignty and threatens its environment. Now, this week, the country's Supreme Court ruled the deal unconstitutional, prompting the president to announce the closure of the mine. Brian Quinn reports.
In the streets of Panama City, an outpouring of joy as demonstrators celebrated the apparently imminent closure of the Cobre Panama copper mine. The country's Supreme Court ruling that a contract signed in October granting a 20-year concession to Canadian mining giant First Quantum Minerals was unconstitutional.
Everyone did their part. Those of us who knew about the environmental issue contributed, along with the lawyers, the farmers, our boatmen from Colón and our youth. Here you can see the diversity of Panama, its strength and its beauty.
Activists and indigenous peoples had mounted weeks of massive street protests, fearing damage to jungle ecosystems and water supplies from the continued exploitation of the vast open-pit mine. Labor unions, too, accused the government of corruption, saying the contract for $375 million in annual revenue was too generous. President Laurentino Cortizo says the process of closing the mine will begin shortly.
Because of the closure process's impact on Panamanian society and its environmental, labor, economic and legal consequences, every decision we make as a country has to be made in a responsible manner.
First Quantum took a majority stake in Cobre Panama in 2013. The company says it has invested some $10 billion into the project. The mine now accounts for more than half its output, representing over 1% of global copper production and as much as 5% of Panamanian GDP, including thousands of jobs.
Here in Europe, property and retail giant Signa has filed for bankruptcy after it failed to secure fresh funding, becoming the biggest casualty of the continent's real estate crash. The group, founded by Austrian billionaire René Benko, is an owner of New York's Chrysler Building and also has a stake in British department store Selfridges. It operates in countries like Switzerland and Germany, where property prices have tumbled to record lows amid a sharp rise in mortgage rates and construction costs. Switzerland's banking regulator, meanwhile, says it's monitoring the events closely as many banks are exposed to debt totaling an estimated €5 billion. Austrian Chancellor, meanwhile, sought to play down the significance of the country's company's collapse.
Insolvencies are part of economic life. We will see exactly how this insolvency actually turns out. The fact remains that Austria is still a very popular investment destination, both in terms of market conditions and in terms of its skilled workers.
The world economy has been surprisingly resilient this year, but may be running out of steam. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development published its latest economic outlook for the next 2 years, predicting global growth to slow to 2.7% in 2024. That's the slowest annual growth since the pandemic. Growth will be driven by emerging economies, with India topping the list. The Chinese economy is expected to expand 4.7%, but that's down from 5.2% this year. The 20-member Eurozone will see weak growth of under 1% amid high interest rates and energy costs. The OECD projects the US economy to grow just 1.5% next year. This comes as the US Commerce Department reported strong growth for the third quarter, revising it up to 5.2% annualized. Inflation is easing across the globe, but not expected to come down to targeted levels before 2025. Let's take a listen.
Our central projections are for a soft landing, but that cannot be taken for granted. Monetary policy needs careful calibration to bring inflation to targets while minimising the impact on growth. These judgments are now harder than earlier in the cycle, and the risks of policy errors are greater.
And as persistent inflation continues to hit consumer pockets, watchdogs are again voicing concern that many retailers and manufacturers are making excessive profits from food inflation. Clemens Waller reports.
Taking advantage of the cost of living crisis, 4 French consumer associations have joined forces to sound the alarm. In an open letter, they accused large supermarket chains of raising prices above inflation-led cost increases on certain products. According to the French Observatory for Food Prices and Profit, between 2021 and 2022, gross profit made by supermarkets rose by 57% on pasta, 12.7% on vegetables, and 27.8% on skimmed milk.
It's historic, and even the very serious financial institutions like the IMF and the ECB are saying these are excessive profits that go beyond the need to cover increasing production costs. So it's abusive.
And France isn't the only country where supermarkets are getting called out. The UK's Competition and Market Authority reported that food price inflation continues to be historically high, despite falling from 19% in March to 10.1% in October. This was driven by higher energy and production costs, but the CMA says certain manufacturers made food inflation even worse.
The evidence collected by the CMA indicates that over the last 2 years, around 3/4 of branded suppliers in products such as infant formula, baked beans, mayonnaise, and pet food have increased their unit profitability, and in doing so, have contributed to higher food price inflation.
One of the branded food items singled out in the report is baby formula, whose average price has increased 25% over 2 years. 85% of the UK market is controlled by 2 companies, Danone and Nestlé.
That report by Clemens Waller, and that's it for business for now.
OK, thanks very much. Yuka Waya there with our business news. That's it. We'll take a short break and I'll be back in a few minutes. Do join us.
The world is ever changing. The news doesn't wait.
France 24 gives a global perspective that an educated, intelligent, and active viewer is going to want to have to be able to fully understand the issues of the day.
That's why it will always be there to help make sense of world events.
J'ai l'habitude de suivre France 24 partout où je me trouve.
et ce grâce à mon smartphone parce que je ne reste pas souvent devant la télé.
Quand une information circule sur la toile, j'utilise l'application de France 24 pour vérifier l'authenticité.
For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what, France 24 is with you everywhere, all the time.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
People and Profit, your business show that goes beyond the numbers and the corporate jargon. Understand everything related to major business stories and how economy affects our lives. People and Profit on France 24 and France24.com.
Welcome back to Live from Paris with me, Angela Diffley. Anxious families await the return of their loved ones on the 6th day of the truce. This as negotiations are still ongoing over whether to extend the ceasefire deal further. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says the Gaza Strip is in the midst of what he's now calling an epic humanitarian catastrophe. And Ukraine's foreign minister declares that the country's NATO allies are showing no sign of war fatigue and remain committed to helping Ukraine. You're watching France 24. Good to have you with us. On the 6th day of the truce between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, both sides are still in negotiations brokered by Qatar on whether or not to renew the ceasefire and its hostage and prisoner exchanges. If not, today will be the last day of the deal. Meanwhile, Israel says it has received a list of hostages set to be released today. Well, not on that list is the 10-month-old baby, the youngest of all the hostages taken on October the 7th, and his 4-year-old brother. The two red-haired children who had especially touched a chord among Israelis. Today, Hamas told Israel that those two children and their mother were killed by an Israeli bombardment. The Israeli military say they are investigating that claim. Well, I spoke a short time ago to France 24's Luke Schrago, who's in Tel Aviv. He told us how what Hamas said about the children had been received.
Well, initially on word that Hamas stating that an Israeli strike had killed those 3 members of that family, just 10-month-old toddler, his 4-year-old brother and their mother. A great deal of shock really hitting Israelis. As you mentioned, it was a matter of this youngest hostage being seen as almost a rallying point around the campaigning for all of these hostages to be released. 159, according to the Israeli military, still in Hamas captivity. Now, we do know that Hamas's armed wing has made previous claims like this. It's previously said that 60 of the hostages were killed by Israeli strikes. Of course, no confirmation possible at this point. The Israeli army again saying that it was was looking at these claims that it was holding Hamas responsible for all of the hostages' security while they were in the Gaza Strip. The families, of course, they've been distraught. We've been speaking to them over previous days. We spoke to the cousin of the father of that family. He told us last night that there was no reason for such young hostages to be held. They've been making special requests and urging international assistance to try and get those hostages released. But at this point, they've asked for privacy, and they're very much hoping that the Israeli authorities and military may be able to refute Hamas's claims. Again, news coming out and waiting for further confirmation of what may in fact have happened.
And that was Luke Schrager. Well, relatives of those Israeli hostage children already released by Hamas have now been talking a little bit about the trauma experienced by their loved ones over nearly 2 months of captivity. Some of them were threatened with weapons, others were beaten, and some were forced to watch violent images of the 7th of October attacks on Israel. And also, after being reunited with their families, some of those children learnt that family members had been killed. While all of them will, of course, need psychological help to deal with the trauma, as James Mulholland explains.
Back in his mother's arms after 52 days in captivity. 12-year-old Eitan Yahalomi was released by Hamas on Monday as part of the temporary truce with Israel. For his family, the relief to have him back is tinged with concern after learning of the abuse he suffered, including being forced to watch footage of the 7th of October massacre.
Hamas forced them to watch horrific films that no one wants to see. Whenever a child cried, they threatened them with weapons. Once in Gaza, everybody, even civilians, beat him. We're talking about a 12-year-old child.
Before she was taken hostage, 9-year-old Emily Hand was described as a normal, noisy kid. But since her release at the weekend, her father says she now only whispers. This mother was finally able to welcome back 2 children, Erez and Sahar Calderon, aged 12 and 16. But as their aunt told our sister channel, France Television, the joy is mitigated, with their father still in captivity.
I'm very worried about Ofer, their dad that left behind in Gaza. A few days they were together, but we don't know for how long. Their dad, they cannot be better if he stays there.
These children are free from captivity, but it will be a long time before they're free of the trauma.
They saw the massacre before their very eyes. That's the first trauma. The second is being kidnapped, being completely removed from life with everything you know taken away. And the third is more than 50 days in captivity. So the only thing we can do with these children is to stop all the emotions and get back to rationality.
At least 4 more children of around 30 taken hostage are still believed to be held in Gaza, including a 10-month-old baby.
James Mulholland. Well, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said today that the Gaza Strip was in the midst of an epic humanitarian catastrophe. This as the head of the World Health Organization also warned again today that overcrowding in Gaza could lead to the spread of infectious diseases. With this report on the humanitarian situation, here's Matthew Mary Carichet.
The lines for drinking water stretched for hours. As the truce between Hamas and Israel enters its 6th day, civilians in Gaza City waited at a desalination plant that is only sometimes operational.
We rarely get fuel. This means we can't provide water for the people, and this leads to long queues of thousands of people. We're not able to operate the facility.
Between 180 and 200 trucks containing water, food, and medical supplies have crossed into Gaza daily since the truce began Friday. That's fewer than half as many trucks as before the fighting began. Aid agencies have warned that current levels of aid are not enough to provide significant relief after 7 weeks of war. Calling the conditions in Gaza catastrophic, the World Food Program warned Tuesday that Gaza's population faced a high risk of famine should the truce end, and with it the access to aid.
In 4 days of humanitarian pause, WFP and partners have delivered desperately needed aid to hundreds of thousands in the hardest to reach areas. Our team saw hunger, desperation, and destruction. People who have not received any relief in weeks. Hundreds of thousands that are facing an immediate risk of starvation. WFP hopes for the extension of this pause, which offered a window of relief that could pave the way for a longer-term calm.
The only way for aid to enter Gaza is through the Rafah crossing on its border with Egypt. The UN Relief Agency for Palestine on Tuesday called on Israel to extend the truce and to open Israeli crossings into Gaza for more humanitarian aid.
And meanwhile, Israel says it has carried out a raid on the Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank and killed 2 senior terrorists. In separate news, the Palestinian Authority that runs parts of the West Bank says 2 children were also killed by gunfire in Jenin. Well, in other news now, 4 police officers were killed and another 18 people were wounded in a Ukrainian strike on a police station in the Russian-controlled part of Ukraine's Kherson region on Tuesday. That's according to the Russian state news agency TASS. And this as both Kyiv and Moscow say Russian forces are ramping up attacks in eastern Ukraine in a bid to secure territorial gains before the end of the year. Meanwhile, Ukraine's foreign minister declared on Wednesday that NATO allies are showing no sign of war fatigue and remain committed to helping Ukraine. Well, I was joined a short time ago by Dave Keating, our correspondent in Brussels. I asked him if the Ukrainian foreign minister is really confident about that support from the West.
Well, I think they were trying to put a brave face on today, but the fact is that the news has not been great in terms of the West support for Ukraine lately. You have Republicans blocking further aid to Ukraine in Washington. You have the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban blocking aid to Ukraine in Brussels. And meanwhile, they're meeting at the same time trying to say that the support remains steadfast. However, we didn't really have any major announcement from this meeting of foreign ministers, this NATO summit today, and that is going to be felt as kind of demoralizing, I'm sure, to the people in Ukraine. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was very keen to stress in his press conference that he didn't see any type of war fatigue, any type of waning in the support, and he said all allies remain committed to further supporting Ukraine. But when he says all allies, it's very evident that that does not include Hungary, doesn't really include Turkey. So it was a kind of, there was a disconnect between what was said at these press conferences at the end of today and what people can see with their own eyes.
Dave Keating there. Moscow says any decision by Helsinki to allow what it called a concentration of troops on its border with Russia would be viewed by Moscow as a threat. Well, this after a senior Polish official posted on social media that Poland was ready to help Finland at its Russian border. And that as Finland is close to closing the last remaining crossing point on its border with Russia at midnight tonight, accusing Russia of orchestrating an operation to direct migrants towards Finland. Russia denies any such manoeuvre, and Finland's border guard says it is unaware of any Polish offer. And well, to the Olympics now here in Paris, and those residents of Paris who are not big sports fans, well, they're bracing for next year's Olympic Games. The Games don't start until July, but already some Parisians are concerned about how congested the capital might become. The latest worry is that metro tickets look set to almost double in price during the Games, rising to €4 a ticket. Well, the Paris transport authorities hope to reassure residents by explaining that those with travel passes won't have to pay those fare hikes. This from Siobhan Silk.
Paris is already the most visited city in the world, and an extra 3 million tourists are expected during the Olympic and Paralympic Games next summer. A huge challenge for the transport system. Extra metros, trains, trams and buses will be running and new lines will be opening, but that's expensive. So the price of the ticket is being doubled from €2.10 to €4 for the duration of the Games, while the cost of a one-week unlimited pass will go from €30 to €70. The Transport Users Union says that's prohibitively expensive, but the regional government has reassured residents the cost of their monthly passes won't go up.
It's the real price, and there's no way everyday commuters from the Paris region should pay for that. It's natural that the Olympic visitors pay the real price of reinforcing public transport during the Games. It's the price they pay for the success of these Games.
Last week, the mayor of Paris came under fire after she warned that improvements to the public transport system wouldn't be ready in time for the Games. The transport minister says they will.
We have just over 200 days left to complete the work. I want to pay tribute to all those who deserve to be encouraged rather than criticized. The teams, the public services, and the French companies that are making this happen by rolling up their sleeves and working like crazy. And we'll be ready thanks to their commitment.
The minister is putting what he calls hardcore restrictions on cars in the city. Motorised vehicles will be banned from areas close to Olympic venues, except for residents and a few other exceptions. But it seems most Parisians just want to avoid the hassle. A poll published earlier this month revealed that more than half of Parisians want to leave town during the festivities.
And that's it from me. Next up is Eye on Africa with Clarisse Fortuné.
With mass layoffs and the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank,
the biggest bank collapse since the 2008 financial crisis, and it shut down today.
The startup kingdom has become a nightmare for some.
And within those 60 days, you need to find a job or get deported out of the country.
I work, I have a job, I pay taxes. So it's not like I'm a bum, you know what I mean?
But can the El Dorado of new technology recover?
People are afraid of where they're putting their money, but now is actually the time to get in because people are losing their jobs. I think this is just a natural ebb and flow.
Silicon Valley Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
Your stories inspire the future. Your daily lives create the news. Your cultures, struggles, and successes are at the heart of our programs. We tell the stories of those who made our planet and those who are building it. We tell the story of the world, shaped by the lives of those who live there.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Our top stories. 12 years in prison for inciting riots, a first such conviction for a South Africa court after 350 people died during days of unrest in 2021. COP28 is set to begin, and Kenya is leading the way in a fight against climate change. The country is emerging as a leader in renewable energy. And Nigeria is turning to bioethanol, a goopy green gel made with organic materials. It's cheaper than cooking gas and better for the environment. For the first time, a South African court sentenced a man to 12 years in prison for inciting unrest. You might remember 2 years ago, more than 350 people were killed during protests that followed the incarceration of ex-President Jacob Zuma. Eunice Masson has been following the trial for us. Eunice, welcome. Tell us, what is the significance of this verdict?
Thank you, Clarice. It's a small significance, to be quite honest. The National Prosecuting Authority welcomed its first conviction against the person who incited violence during the deadly July riots. However, this one conviction does not bring justice for the more than 230 people who were killed during the 8-day violence. Now, after 2 years, no person has been charged for murder. Mdumazini Zuma was sentenced to 12 years behind bars for inciting violence at a mall in KwaZulu-Natal. And just to add, the accused is not related to the former President Jacob Zuma, whose incarceration was the direct cause of the deadly riots. Now, 354 people died, and damages to infrastructure amounted to at least 50 billion rand. Another trial, described as a mass trial of 65 people, is expected to commence in January, where the accused face charges relating to terrorism and conspiracy to commit public violence. South Africa's police were caught off guard by the 2021 unrest. And a report commissioned by the President Cyril Ramaphosa found the police were unprepared when thousands of people stormed and looted shops. Now, considering next year's general election, coupled with social and economic pressures, local and global reports have warned that the country is running a risk of further civil unrest in 2024.
Thank you very much, Eunice Masson, reporting from Cape Town in South Africa. And while staying in South Africa, international mediators were negotiating an extension to the Israel-Hamas truce. In the meantime, hundreds of people joined a pro-Palestinian march in Johannesburg on the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. That day has been celebrated since 1978, following a resolution by the United Nations. Let's hear from some of the participants.
It calls upon each and every one of us to protest against any injustices that happens around the world, because that thing that is happening in Palestine can happen to anyone around the world. So it calls upon each and every one of us to stand against injustice.
We want to stop and stand against the silence or sort of indifference that we've seen across the world.
We are doing our intense human duty as people did with South Africa when we as black people were oppressed. People showed solidarity with us, and this is the human imperative and duty to show solidarity and to support the cry of the oppressed people in the world.
Now to Senegal, that's what we call a great catch. Three tons of pure cocaine were seized by the Senegalese Navy 150 kilometers off the coast on Tuesday. Drug smugglers often use West African countries as a transit point to ship cocaine from South America to Europe. But now they've also become a region of high consumption, according to the United Nations on Drugs and Crime. An alternative to cooking gas, bioethanol. In Nigeria, people are turning to this goopy green gel made with organic materials, including food scraps, agriculture waste, and even water hyacinth. Cheaper and more environmentally friendly. Caroline Lambouli explains.
It doesn't look like much, but it's been a game changer for Shola Adeyemi. Bioethanol is made from organic materials, and it's cheaper than regular cooking gas.
I give it a try. It was so nice. It cooks fast. I use it in cooking beans. For you to know, when people say beans takes time, I use it in cooking beans then.
The cost of living has skyrocketed in Nigeria since President Bola Ahmed Tinubu ended a fuel subsidy in May. A kilogram of gas now costs around 1,000 naira, or around $1.25, while a liter of biofuel costs just over $1, and it lasts for longer. Last month, year-on-year customer inflation rose to around 27%, the highest in about 18 years. As well as being cheaper than regular cooking gas, biofuel gel releases far less harmful emissions into the atmosphere. According to the UN, carbon dioxide emissions could be reduced by over 4 million tons in Nigeria if all households use bioethanol for cooking.
We have a lot of non-communicable respiratory cardiovascular diseases right now, which is traceable to air pollution. So we call it household air pollution. So switching to a fuel like biofuel, which is renewable, is going to help us reduce the casualties on these health issues, at the same time protecting our environment from carbon emission.
More than 93,000 women die in Nigeria each year from diseases caused by domestic air pollution, according to the World Health Organization.
All of these green solutions to get us to COP28. The next summit on climate change is about to kick off in Dubai. World leaders and other key players will discuss climate action. And as we know, Africa is only responsible for only a fraction of global gas emissions, but suffers the most. Some nations are leading by example, like Kenya, where almost 90% of its electricity now comes from green sources. Olivia Bizot and Elodie Cousin explain.
No more monthly electricity bills. The dream has become a reality for an increasing number of warehouses in Nairobi that have switched to solar. The panels now account for 5.5% of the total installed capacity in Kenya, and it's on the rise.
The power tariffs in Kenya currently have gone high. And the solar is one of the solutions to try and bring clean and affordable power. The rate of adoption of solar energy is on high rise. And it's actually the future of clean energy.
The industrial sector isn't alone in embracing solar. An increasing number of farmers have also turned to this renewable energy source. Growing crops under these panels is not only helping them increase their yields, but it's also lightening their wallets.
It's something that is free. You only need the panels, you just incur the initial cost. Then from there you get the sunlight. It's a natural resource. We feel it was worth it because it's a long-term solution to our energy problems.
Kenya lies on the equator where there is plenty of sunshine all year round. As the costs of the panels drop, this expert believes that Kenya could become the world's leading producer of solar energy.
Here in Africa, we have abundant land. We have more sun than anywhere else on the planet. So if you combine those, then you're able to produce energy sustainably, and you're able to produce it on a massive scale that can be able to meet the demands both locally but also to meet global demands.
As 2023 continues to experience global temperature records and with COP28 around the corner, Kenya is hoping to set an example for Africa and the world.
Farming while taking into account plants, animals, humans and environment, that's basically the concept of agroecology. In Togo, a training center is teaching just that with eco-friendly farming techniques to build resilience against the challenges of climate change. Look at this report by Emmanuel Soji and Raphael Ntale, told by Priscilla Olympio.
This practice-based course teaches farmers how to produce rice despite the shorter rainy seasons caused by climate change. The class takes place at SIDAP, a 50-acre training center located in northern Togo. Here, students learn agroecological practices along with traditional methods for preserving water and soil.
The smallest amount of rainfall is controlled on site and is sufficient to adequately irrigate the rice.
During the last 40 years, SIDAP has trained over 10,000 farmers. It is the only agricultural program in the country that integrates climate change in its curriculum.
SIDAP has incorporated agrometeorology into its training program to play an important part in guiding young people to understand the weather. The first lesson is to be aware that there is a change.
Near the training center stands an open-air lab spanning 24 acres, built by SIDAP's founders, Tieda and Seda BOTSWANA. In this eco-village, a system of 100 tanks collect rainwater, while small stone embankments protect against erosion and guide water to spread into the dry soils.
We have managed to replicate this small miracle that SIDAP in Baga had already achieved. The same methods can make the land fertile, bring forth water and create forests everywhere.
This is the difference between a soil that has accumulated humus and a soil that hasn't. Locals can't believe that we can harvest cassava or yam in this area. Who would have believed that citrus fruits could thrive here?
The agricultural accomplishments of the BOTSWANA couple attract communities from all the region. Their villages are severely affected by climate change, facing both floods and long periods of drought after the short rainy seasons.
Thank you for watching Eye on Africa. More news coming up.
Want to know? Find out here.
With France 24, learn to tell what's true from what's fake on social networks.
Identify the false rumors in European news stories.
Get reliable information about migration.
Truth or fake, every day we bring you information that is verified and put into context.
France 24 is news you can rely on every day across all platforms.
with mass layoffs and the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank.
The biggest bank collapse since the 2008 financial crisis, and it shut down today.
The startup kingdom has become a nightmare for some.
And within those 60 days, you need to find a job or get deported out of the country.
I work, I have a job, I pay taxes. So it's not like I'm a bum, you know what I mean?
But can the El Dorado of new technology recover?
People are afraid of where they're putting their money, but now is actually the time to get in because people are losing their jobs. I think this is just a natural ebb and flow.
Silicon Valley Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Live from Paris, world news and analysis from France 24. I'm Mark Owen. These are the main world news headlines. 12 more hostages freed this Wednesday. Hamas says an Israeli family held hostage has been killed in airstrikes by Israel, the dead including a 10-month-old baby. Israel currently investigating those claims. There are hopes that the truce in Gaza will be extended further. We're following all developments for you. COP28, the president denies using the forum to set up lucrative oil and gas deals. The summit to save the planet gets underway in the United Arab Emirates tomorrow. The French justice minister has been cleared of charges of having used his office to settle personal scores. Éric Dupond-Moretti walking free from the court in Paris this Thursday. This is Live from Paris. Thank you very much for being with us. We start with the events in the Middle East. It's hoped that the truce in Gaza will be extended. We're awaiting news on this very issue. International mediators this Wednesday have been working to extend the truce in the Gaza Strip, encouraging Hamas militants to keep freeing hostages in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners and further relief from Israel's air and ground offensive. The ceasefire will otherwise end within a day. So during this period of our program, we're expecting some kind of news. Earlier, a hostage release took place ahead of the swap of 10 militant-held hostages, Israelis, plus 2 Russian citizens. The plan was for 30 Palestinian prisoners to go the other way. Israel has welcomed the release of dozens of hostages in recent days and says it will maintain the truce if Hamas keeps freeing captives. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, underscored this issue, saying that Israel will resume its campaign, as he puts it, to eliminate Hamas, which had ruled Gaza for some 16 years and orchestrated the deadly attack on Israel, killing 1,200 people at least and triggering the war. The atrocities of October the 7th, of course, kicking it all off. Let's hear from Luke Shrego, our correspondent, joining us now live from Tel Aviv. Luke, good evening to you. Can you bring us up to date with the very latest on the situation?
Well, we do know that the hostages were handed over to the Red Cross earlier on Wednesday evening. They were on their way to Egypt, but we are hearing now that there's been some sort of hold-up. Hamas has said that there's some sort of logistics problem, which seems to have been confirmed by the Israeli side as well. They've blamed what they call technical reasons, but do say that these hostages are going to be free tonight. Now, this, of course, comes with 30 Palestinian prisoners being will be handed over once those hostages are back in Israeli territory. Under the deal, they have the Israelis have 2 hours to release the Palestinian prisoners. A list of 15 women and 15 minors handed over earlier in the day as the temporary truce continues. Now, Hamas had also on the sidelines of this, beyond releasing the 10 Israeli citizens, Israeli hostages that have been held, they also released 2 more hostages on the sidelines, both with Russian nationality, ostensibly as what they called a gesture to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, Hamas had said that it was open to extending the truce another 4 days, Israel previously saying that it would continue abiding by the truce if hostages continued to be released. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, was saying that on Wednesday evening there was no question that Israel's offensive was going to continue when exchanges were over. So the question now is whether this truce is going to come to an end early on Thursday morning, or if negotiations, which are still ongoing, will likely be going on right up to the last minute, will be able to find some sort of way forward. Israel's war cabinet was meeting on Wednesday evening to decide further, with international pressure as well very much coming through. Qatar, of course, mediating between Israel and Hamas, earlier stating that there was some sort of motion towards an agreement over male hostages, with negotiations also ongoing over captured Israeli soldiers, with the possibility of a longer truce that could lead to an ultimate ceasefire. But unless both sides can come to that kind of agreement to push things forward, we are really at the moment left in darkness.
Luke, for now, thank you very much indeed. Luke Shrego, our correspondent there in Tel Aviv. As Luke was speaking, word coming in that Hamas is unhappy with the truce extension proposals as put forward by Israel. And just coming into us now here at France 24 News, that 10 Israeli hostages handed over to the Red Cross. This coming from a source that is the Israeli Army radio service, usually a very reliable source for matters Israeli. But obviously we're watching for all developments there, and we'll get back to Luke Shrego within a moment if there are any serious developments there from the situation in the Middle East. The release of the hostages this Thursday has been overshadowed somewhat by an unconfirmed claim by Hamas, the largest militant group in Gaza, of course, that a family of Israeli hostages, including the youngest hostage, that's a baby called Kafir Bibas, had been killed some time ago during an Israeli bombardment. Now, there's a campaign to get this family back released, which has been mounted quite vociferously in Israel. Officials there said they are checking this Hamas report about the Bibas family. It is a very sensitive issue in Israel. The family is among the most high-profile hostages yet to be freed. Now, relatives of the Bibas family say they've been informed of this Hamas report.
With most child hostages now released, concern over the fate of the youngest, not even a year old, has only intensified. Baby Kfir Bibas was just 9 months old when he was taken by Hamas militants, along with his brother and mother.
For God's sake, a 9-month-old baby. I can't just stay at home and do nothing.
As a mother and grandmother, when I see the photos of these little ones, my heart breaks.
The story shocked the world as it came to light with these images, filmed by Hamas and widely shared after the 7th of October attacks. Accompanied by armed men, another man drills his way through the front door of a house. Shiri Bibas is seen holding her 2 children to her chest, surrounded by men who say in Arabic that they don't want to hurt her. It's believed to be the last images of baby Kfir and his family before they were taken into Gaza. Since then, there's been no news. Of the hostages so far released, none saw the Bibas family in Gaza. Their relatives have been left desperately trying to comprehend.
Are these the enemies of Hamas? I just don't understand it. As we've seen other hostages, they were very thin and malnourished and had medical problems when they got back. So we know that they are treated poorly, and the hygiene is not good, and we are really, really worried.
Baby Kfir, his brother and his mother were reportedly held by another militant group and therefore not expected to be released as part of Hamas's deal with Israel.
10 Israeli hostages handed over, according to Israel Army Radio. We're awaiting news on the extension of the truce. Hamas reportedly not happy with the deal as outlined by Israel. We're watching for all developments on the situation in the Middle East. Next, the host of the UN climate conference that starts in Dubai on Thursday is denying reports that he was using his presidency of the talks on global warming to pursue fossil fuel deals. The allegations against Sultan Al Jaber have found long-running suspicions over the wisdom of a petrostate, that's the United Arab Emirates, hosting the COP28 talks. The UAE's Minister of Industry and Technology is also CEO of his country's oil giant, ADNOC. Jaber also chairs a UAE-owned clean energy company, so a man with many strings to his bow, you might say. He strongly denies reports that he was using his position as COP president to pitch new oil and gas investments to foreign governments. The allegations emerged in an expose by the Centre for Climate Reporting. Talking points prepared for Jaber for COP meetings with foreign governments, pushed joint business opportunities in fossil fuels. They're the allegations.
These allegations are false, not true, incorrect, and not accurate. And it's an attempt to undermine the work of the COP28 presidency. I promise you, never ever did I see these talking points that they refer to, or that I ever even used such talking points in my discussions.
And there we go. Totally balanced. Both sides of the story outlined there. Let's bring in for the analysis a climate scientist. She's Chloe Brimacombe from the Wegener Center at the University of Graz in Austria. Chloe, thanks for being with us. How do you feel when you hear such allegations that the host of COP28 was ready to use the forum to peddle his fossil fuel businesses?
I think there was a lot of concern in the run-up to this COP because we know that this is going to be the biggest COP we've had to date, and most of the delegates that were invited were to do with the fossil fuel industry. However, I attended COP in Egypt last year, and there was concerns in the lead up to this one as well. And what you don't see on the news is there is a lot of local scale and international organisations that come together at COP. And although progress is sometimes slow in international negotiations, there is a lot of ongoing initiatives to fight climate change. And this year we also see the first Health Day, which is really important because climate change affects our health as well as other parts of our daily lives.
Indeed, it does affect our health, and as you say, it's a very important aspect, Chloe. But is this issue with the Sultan a sign that maybe some delegates aren't really taking the situation as seriously as they should, or do they just see it as a way that they can cash in?
There is definitely a lot of concern. I mean, we've seen a lot of extreme weather around the world that is increasing as a result of our changing climate. And we've already heard in the lead up with COP starting tomorrow that there is concerns over the use of fossil fuel phase out in some of the texts. And we need a fossil fuel phase out. We need a green transition urgently if we are going to keep global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we've seen that this year is on record to be the hottest on record, and we really don't want to miss the opportunity, which is getting shorter and shorter, to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius and have these impacts that we saw in the summer in Europe happening year on year and getting worse.
Indeed, and I remind people that you are a climate scientist. This isn't an activist talking. This is someone who's looking at these things with the cold scientific eye. This is the situation we are in. What was pledged in Paris all those years ago isn't probably going to happen, is it?
It seems very unlikely, and this year we will be able to tell whether countries are on target. We know so far from scientific evidence that it seems that they aren't, and we know that we need countries to be more ambitious about their plans to cut emissions, whether this is carbon emissions, but also another greenhouse gas, methane, which also increases our warming. But we also need governments to be serious about loss and damage funding, which will be a big focus of this COP, and also adaptation funding, because as we saw in a report by the UN Environmental Programme this last week, there is an inequality in those cutting emissions, but also those impacted by the worst effects of climate change.
Chloe, thank you very much for setting up our coverage, which begins tomorrow, of course, when the event gets underway.
Thank you.
Chloe Brimacombe, thank you, I must say once again, climate scientist at the Wegener Center at the University of Graz in Austria. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. And, of course, we'll be giving you full coverage of what happens at COP28, which gets underway Thursday in Dubai. A special court has cleared France's Justice Minister of Conflict of Interest, ruling that he wasn't guilty of having used his office to settle personal scores. This happened in the first such trial of a French government minister while still in office. Éric Dupond-Moretti had denied wrongdoing and refused to resign before or during his two-week trial, defying what had been an unwritten rule until recent years that members of government quit when put under investigation. The verdict was a political victory then for him and his allies. Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne saying that she was happy to say that Dupond-Moretti would stay on in his role. Let's hear from France's Justice Minister.
More than 3 years ago, I was waiting for the moment to finally explain myself. And the Court of Justice of the Republic said that I didn't want to get revenge, like I always said. I want to turn a new page, even if it was a difficult moment. And I want to retake my regular duties for my work, which is the reason why I stayed a long time after the decision at the Élysée Palace to meet the President of the Republic.
Eric Dupond-Moretti speaking on a channel called France 2, part of France Télévisions, the public broadcaster, state broadcaster here in France. Perhaps he went home via the metro system. I doubt it, he's a minister. But the Paris metro ticket prices are going to double during the 2024 Olympics. This confirmed by Valérie Pécresse, French capital region's president, confirming this news, adding that residents with metro passes would be shielded from the temporary rise. Visitors would be charged a fair price, says Madame Pécresse. It was Mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, who warned last week that public transport services, which are provided by the regional authority, would be insufficient during the events. The Olympics are from July 26th to August 11th, the Paralympics from August 28th to September the 8th.
Paris is already the most visited city in the world, and an extra 3 million tourists are expected during the Olympic and Paralympic Games next summer. A huge challenge for the transport system. Extra metros, trains, trams and buses will be running and new lines will be opening, but that's expensive. So the price of the ticket is being doubled from €2.10 to €4 for the duration of the Games, while the cost of a one-week unlimited pass will go from €30 to €70. The Transport Users Union says that's prohibitively expensive, but the regional government has reassured residents the cost of their monthly passes won't go up.
It's the real price, and there's no way everyday commuters from the Paris region should pay for that. It's natural that the Olympic visitors pay the real price of reinforcing public transport during the Games. It's the price they pay for the success of these Games.
Last week, the mayor of Paris came under fire after she warned that improvements to the public transport system wouldn't be ready in time for the Games. The transport minister says they will.
We have just over 200 days left to complete the work. I want to pay tribute to all those who deserve to be encouraged rather than criticized. The teams, the public services, and the French companies that are making this happen by rolling up their sleeves and working like crazy. And we'll be ready thanks to their commitment.
The minister is putting what he calls hardcore restrictions on cars in the city. Motorised vehicles will be banned from areas close to Olympic venues, except for residents and a few other exceptions. But it seems most Parisians just want to avoid the hassle. A poll published earlier this month revealed that more than half of Parisians want to leave town during the festivities.
Siobhan Silk with that look at how things might affect us all here in Paris during the Olympics next year. Time for Business. Duke has joined us in the studio. A major casualty of Europe's ongoing property crisis. An Austrian giant has gone bankrupt.
Well, Mark, the holding company of Signa Group, founded by Austrian billionaire René Benko, but operating internationally, has filed for insolvency in a Vienna court after failing to secure fresh funding. The group is an owner of New York's Chrysler Building and British department store Selfridges. It operates in countries like Switzerland and has a large presence in Germany, where property prices have tumbled to record lows amid a sharp rise in mortgage rates and construction costs. Switzerland's banking regulator says it's monitoring the events closely, as many banks are exposed to the company's multi-billion euro debt. Austrian Chancellor, however, sought to play down the significance of its collapse.
Insolvencies are part of economic life. We will see exactly how this insolvency actually turns out. The fact remains that Austria is still a very popular investment destination, both in terms of market conditions and in terms of its skilled workers.
Shares in Signa's e-commerce unit, Signa Sports United, tumbled after it said that it had also initiated insolvency proceedings and decided to drop its listing on the New York Stock Exchange. Wall Street indices saw a mixed finish, generally rising earlier in the trading session following positive economic data. General Motors shares, though, rose as much as 10% this Wednesday after it announced a massive stock buyback plan worth $10 billion and a 33% increase in dividend, despite a financial hit from a lengthy strike. It said the United Auto Workers walkouts have cost the company $1.1 billion and lost production of 95,000 vehicles, and a further $9.3 billion due to new labour deals reached after the walkouts. The world economy has been surprisingly resilient this year, but appears to be running out of steam. The Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development published its latest economic outlook for the next 2 years, predicting global growth to slow to 2.7% in 2024, the slowest annual growth rate since the pandemic. Annual growth will be driven by emerging economies, with India topping the list. The Chinese economy is expected to expand at 4.7%, but that's down from 5.2% this year. The 20-member Eurozone will see weak growth of under 1% as high interest rates and energy costs bite. The OECD projects the US economy to grow just 1.5% next year, and this comes as US Commerce Department reported strong growth for the third quarter. It revised up GDP growth of the third quarter to 5.2%. And that wraps up the business news.
Yuka, thank you very much indeed. Great to see you. Yuka there with all the business. Let's cross the studio. Catalina's over by the big board for truth or fake. That is the eternal question on this slot. Humanitarian workers, we are told, the new target of the Israel-Hamas disinformation war. Catalina, tell us, truth or fake?
As you said, Mark, humanitarian aid workers located in the Israel-Hamas conflict zones such as Gaza and the West Bank are the latest target of a disinformation with viral false claims that allegedly show these workers taking sides supporting either Hamas or, in the country, Israel. So let's begin with this viral claim that was made on Instagram by this Israeli influencer called Natalia Dadan. She has over 900,000 followers on Instagram, where she claims that this video was taken on November 9th in Jenin in the West Bank. So we're going to take a look at the video that she claims shows a medic. The one that we see right here, she claims this is a medic from Doctors Without Borders who went to a Hamas terrorist, the one that we see laying on the ground, who was shot allegedly by Israel Defense Forces. She then says that this medic lifted this man up and took his weapon and then brought it to another terrorist. As she says that this man, who she claims is a Doctors Without Borders medic, abused his position since the IDF cannot shoot at him. We also found the same claims were made on X. Here you have the claim with the same video. The same video was also used with the similar claims on Facebook, except they claim that this man was a worker from the Red Crescent. Either way, accusing humanitarian aid workers or Doctors Without Borders, who are meant to stay in neutral, of taking sides, this time around taking Hamas' side.
Okay, was that really a medic, doctor, call it whatever you like, from the organisation Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières? Was it really somebody who was basically a medical person?
That is indeed somebody, but we found that this medic, at least he does not belong to the organization, the NGO called Doctors Without Borders. So this claim is hence fake. Let's take a look. Let's focus on the uniforms for this debunk. In the footage that is in the fake claims, this man, he is wearing an orange vest with black and white stripes at the waist. Here we have a picture of the uniforms worn by those doctors that work at Doctors Without Borders. You could see that they wear this white vest with the clear logo and identification of their organization. So the person depicted in the video is clearly not wearing any identification that belongs to Doctors Without Borders. Then others claim that this was a worker from another humanitarian organization called Red Crescent. Here are their uniforms. You can see this claim is also inaccurate since they wear these red grayish uniforms and have nothing to do with the ones we see in the fake claims with the orange vest. The person in this video is actually actually wearing the uniform that seems to match the uniform of those that work at Palestinian Medical Relief Society, which operates in the West Bank and Gaza. Here we have a photo of them in their official Facebook page where they're wearing the same uniform. You could also see this comparison of both more clearly, where you could see that it is the same uniform. The AFP reached out to the Palestinian Medical Relief Society for more context on this video, but they still did not reply. The AFP also contacted Doctors Without Borders on this situation, who said that this type of disinformation could incite violence, and they said it's calling it a severe threat, not only against their staff located in these areas, but to all humanitarian workers in the region.
Indeed, this is the problem. Once the neutrality is called into question, erroneously, falsely, maliciously by someone online, it creates a whole different way of people looking at how these people are working, and creates a danger for the genuine operators. So similar fake claims have been made, accusing a member of the Red Cross of supporting Israel. Tell us more.
That's right, Mark. This claim is going extremely viral on X. Here we can see one post made by Al Jazeera magazine, seen over 4.1 million times on X. It was then reposted by Jake Shields on X as well, seen over 3.7 million times, posted on November 25th. These users claim that this video, you could see a member of the Red Cross. We're going to show you the video where they claim that this member of the Red Cross is seen placing what appears to be a tracker on this Hamas member following an Israeli hostage release. Here we're going to show. Here you can see, when you see a red light showing up, is the moment where they claim right there that this red light would prove that this man placed the tracker in this Hamas member. As they say, the Red Cross is supposed to be a neutral party, so this is a shameful act that delegitimizes their entire organization, as this man claims. This debunk was made by BBC Verify journalist, who you could trust and follow on Twitter, or now known as X. He's been fact-checking every day since the conflict began in Gaza. He says that what's supposed to be a tracking device is simply the reflection of light from the van that was carrying the hostages. So we're going to take a look at the images that he posted to support his claim. Images from the Hamas organization, where you could indeed see the lights of the van that are reflecting on the Red Cross's members' shirt that they used to claim that this was a tracker, to falsely claim that this was a tracker. So there you have it. Let's try to avoid this type of disinformation that invalidates the very crucial work that these humanitarian aid workers are performing in Gaza.
Indeed, when you pointed out, it looks completely logical what it is. But what happens, I suppose, is that people look at something, they use it to sort of basically justify their own agenda, then it all goes boom like that, and that's how it all spreads. Catalina, thank you for Truth or Fake. Great to see you. Thank you so much for Business too, Yuka Roya. Lovely to see you as well. And thanks to you all for watching wherever you are in the world. Stay with us. More to come, live from Paris.
With mass layoffs and the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank,
the biggest bank collapse since the 2008 financial crisis, and it shut down today.
The startup kingdom has become a nightmare for some.
And within those 60 days, you need to find a job or get deported out of the country.
I work. I have a job. I pay taxes. So it's not like I'm a bum, you know what I mean?
But can the El Dorado of new technology recover?
People are afraid of where they're putting their money, but now is actually the time to get in, because people are losing their jobs. I think this is just a natural ebb and flow.
Silicon Valley Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
Join us on Down to Earth, where we explore the incredibly complex relationship between humans and our planet. We meet the people behind fascinating environmental, health and technological innovations in a bid for sustainable solutions to our changing world. Down to Earth on France 24 and France24.com.
You're watching Live in Paris. I'm Marco, and these are the main world news headlines. The truce in Gaza, it is hoped it will be extended further. We're awaiting developments on that. Meanwhile, more hostages have been freed this Wednesday. Hamas says an Israeli family held hostage has been killed in airstrikes by Israel. And that, unfortunately, means that the death includes a 10-month-old baby. Israel is investigating these claims. COP28, its president denies using the forum to set up lucrative oil and gas deals. The summit to save the planet gets underway in the United Arab Emirates tomorrow. State of emergency in Amazonas, the largest state in Brazil, suffering the worst drought in its history. Weeks without rain, 152,000 families are affected. That's 600,000 people. This is Life in Paris. Thank you very much for being with us. Hostages released and hopes of the truce being extended. We're awaiting news certainly on the truce. International mediators this Wednesday working to extend the ceasefire in Gaza, encouraging Hamas militants to keep freeing hostages in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners and further relief from Israel's air and ground offensive. The ceasefire will otherwise end within the day. Earlier, a hostage release took place ahead of the swap of some 10 militant-held hostages, held, of course, by Hamas since October the 7th. There were 2 Russian citizens released too. The plan was for 30 Palestinian prisoners to go the other way. We understand from reports coming from Israeli military radio, that is seen as a trustworthy source of Israeli news, that 10 Israeli hostages have been handed over to the International Red Cross. Well, Israel has welcomed the release of dozens of hostages in recent days and says it will maintain the truce if Hamas keeps freeing captives. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu underscored that Israel will resume its campaign, as he puts it, to eliminate Hamas, which has ruled Gaza for 16 years and orchestrated the deadly attack on Israel, killing 1,200 people and triggering the war. At the end of the truce, Netanyahu is saying that will continue if this truce is not extended. The release of hostages this Thursday, then, overshadowed by an unconfirmed claim by Hamas that the family of Israeli hostages, including the youngest hostage, baby Kafir Bibas, had been killed some time ago during an Israeli bombardment. Israeli officials say they're checking the Hamas report about the Bibas family. This is clearly a very sensitive issue in Israel. The family is among the most high-profile hostages yet to be freed. Relatives of the Bibas family say they've been informed of what Hamas is saying.
With most child hostages now released, concern over the fate of the youngest, not even a year old, has only intensified. Baby Kfir Bibas was just 9 months old when he was taken by Hamas militants, along with his brother and mother.
For God's sake, a 9-month-old baby. I can't just stay at home and do nothing.
As a mother and grandmother, when I see the photos of these little ones, my heart breaks.
The story shocked the world as it came to light with these images, filmed by Hamas and widely shared after the 7th of October attacks. Accompanied by armed men, another man drills his way through the front door of a house. Shiri Bibas is seen holding her 2 children to her chest, surrounded by men who say in Arabic that they don't want to hurt her. It's believed to be the last images of baby Kfir and his family before they were taken into Gaza. Since then, there's been no news. Of the hostages so far released, none saw the Bibas family in Gaza. Their relatives have been left desperately trying to comprehend.
Are these the enemies of Hamas? I just don't understand it. As we've seen other hostages, they were very thin and malnourished and had medical problems when they got back. So we know that they are treated poorly and the hygiene is not good, and we are really, really worried.
Baby Kfir, his brother and his mother were reportedly held by another militant group and therefore not expected to be released as part of Hamas's deal with Israel.
Let's tell you a bit more about the aid situation. There have been a whole host of aid trucks taken into the Gaza Strip by the Palestinian Red Cross this Wednesday, bringing it to a total of something like 160 trucks that have gone in since the truce began. But aid organisations inside the Gaza Strip say that the six-day truce between Israel and Hamas has been insufficient to deal with the humanitarian catastrophe caused by the war. They're asking for an extended truce and more goods allowed across the border. Here at France 24, Matthew Berry-Carachet has this.
The lines for drinking water stretch for hours. As the truce between Hamas and Israel enters its sixth day, civilians in Gaza City waited at a desalination plant that is only sometimes operational.
We rarely get fuel. This means we can't provide water for the people, and this leads to long queues of thousands of people. We're not able to operate the facility.
Between 180 and 200 trucks containing water, food, and medical supplies have crossed into Gaza daily since the truce began Friday. That's fewer than half as many trucks as before the fighting began. Aid agencies have warned that current levels of aid are not enough to provide significant relief after 7 weeks of war. Calling the conditions in Gaza catastrophic, the World Food Programme warned Tuesday that Gaza's population faced a high risk of famine should the truce end, and with it the access to aid.
In 4 days of humanitarian pause, WFP and partners have delivered desperately needed aid to hundreds of thousands in the hardest to reach areas. Our team saw hunger, desperation, and destruction. People who have not received any relief in weeks. Hundreds of thousands that are facing an immediate risk of starvation. WFP hopes for the extension of this pause, which offered a window of relief that could pave the way for a longer-term calm.
The only way for aid to enter Gaza is through the Rafah crossing on its border with Egypt. The UN Relief Agency for Palestine on Tuesday called on Israel to extend the truce and to open Israeli crossings into Gaza for more humanitarian aid.
The war in Gaza is being sharply watched by Palestinians in Lebanon. Many people have links to the area affected, Gaza Strip and beyond. It's adding to the tensions, as you can well imagine. There are already flashpoints, of course, between Israel's military and militants of Hezbollah. Our Beirut correspondent Rabah Taha with this.